A lot of you guys have requested it. A lot of you guys demanded it in comments. So also, since we've already gone into Grimgor Ironhide, we will talk about Skarsnik, the Warlord of the Eight Peaks. Now, we know that Skarsnik is already in Total War Warhammer, so what we're going to do today is talk about his little lore blurb as always, then go into how Gobbla works in Tabletop versus how he's incorporated in Total War Warhammer, how the Skarsnik's Proddor is incorporated in both, how Sneaky Schemes works and Trixie Traps, and all the kind of things that make Skarsnik in Tabletop, and how they've taken that translation into Total War Warhammer. Again, doing these kind of videos kind of helps us kind of get into the mind of how Creative Assembly takes their already existent rules in Tabletop and jams them into their system, which is Total War Warhammer 1 and 2, and then hopefully eventually 3. Now with this, we kind of hopefully glean some ideas of how they do stuff so that we can make some better guesses, hypotheses on what Total War Warhammer 3 is going to be like. But let's talk here about Skarsnik, Warlord of the Eight Peaks. Skarsnik is the chieftain of the Crooked Moon tribe and the most powerful night goblin in the world's Edge Mountains. All the surrounding Greenskin tribes acknowledge Skarsnik's overlordship of the peaks, valleys, and upper levels of the ruined dwarf hold of Karak 8 Peaks. Through devious machinations and relentless spite, Skarsnik has risen to command in the midst of the bitter and ongoing three-way battle between the Greenskins, dwarfs, and Skaven. Skarsnik is a mastermind when it comes to laying complex ambushes and setting elaborate traps. When necessary, however, the self-proclaimed warlord of the Eight Peaks is more than capable of leading an assault. Although a fierce fighter himself, what really makes Skarsnik formidable is his ever-present pet, the giant cave squig named Gobbla. Grown huge on a steady diet of dwarfs and Skaven, Gobbla will attempt to bite anything that is near-sighted, beady eyes, and can focus on. Its nearsighted beady eyes can focus on. Gobbla's massive teeth and voracious appetite can clear a hallway of stormbound assault, or bleak the most determined of dwarfish defenses in the blink of an eye. Although it galls orcs to take orders from a diminutive night goblin, Skarsnik backs up his authority when needed, and Gobbla has feasted on dozens of failed orc challengers. A merciless opponent, Skarsnik is forever devising new traps with which to lure his enemies to their doom. His mere name kindles incandescent rage in dwarfs. It is said that the abominable deeds done by Skarsnik have gained their own chapter in the Book of Grudges. But the dwarfs are not alone in hating Skarsnik. The Skaven have made innumerable pacts with the Greenskins, only to find them themselves being double-crossed by arguably the shrewdest night goblin ever. Skarsnik orders heaps of Skaven skulls stacked into grim monuments to demoralize his Ratman foes. Queek Headtaker, second in command, and right claw lord to the Grand Ruler of Clan Moors, has vowed to place the head of Skarsnik on his trophy rack. Not a day goes by on Karak 8 Peaks without some plot, probing raid, ambush, assassination, or full-scale assault. Yet still, Skarsnik rules supreme. By the light of the flickering candles made of dwarf fat, Skarsnik sits on his iron throne and plots yet more wicked schemes of conquest. So, in this current stage in the lore, in this year in the lore, Skarsnik already owns and controls 8 Peaks. We don't see until subsequent times of the end times when Belegar takes back 8 Peaks. Then Queek Headtaker goes to attack Belegar, with Skarsnik going to attack Belegar, and all the tumultuousness of 8 Peak kind of embroils from there. And that's kind of the constant fight of Karak 8 Peaks, right? Is that constant conflict, that constant back and forth, that giant three-way tug of war, which I've never even seen in real life, between these three races. So we see that kind of embodied in the actual Total War Warhammer campaign, right? We see that both Belegar and Skarsnik have to race to Karak 8 Peaks, and until they do, they have massive penalties. Like he can't even recruit things without it, so he needs to get there to get those recruits up. And there's massive penalties to Belegar for his public order, for his growths, and all the such. So, and I think it's also for his upkeep costs. So there's all sorts of these penalties that they have to get to Karak 8 Peaks ASAP, and that kind of plays real heavily into their lore, and I really appreciate that they've taken that kind of approach to them. Now let's take a look at the way Skarsnik's rules work. So Gobbla, rather than being part of Skarsnik like he is in Total War Warhammer. In the tabletop, Gobbla is his own unit. I mean, he actually kind of works as a single infantry model alongside Skarsnik with his own profile and everything. He moves alongside Skarsnik. They have the same movement and all that kind of jazz. But as far as, say, like his weapons skill, his strength, his initiative, his attack, it is separate. So when he attacks on his own. Between the two of them, they make for a total of 8 attacks, which is pretty impressive in the tabletop. So it's pretty fearsome indeed. So Gobbla, rather than being kind of just attached to Skarsnik, he does quite a bit of damage separately, which is interesting though, because if you take a look at the way his profile works in Total War Warhammer, you see that he's got a large anti-large bonus and an AP bonus. That kind of plays heavily into what we see with the actual Gobbla himself, right? We see him as this wrecking ball, this squig wrecking ball that can kill through hordes of storm vermin alike and eat dwarfs and stuff like that. So maybe this significant weapon strength, this AP, this anti-large bonus, all come from Skarsnik's use of Gobbla kind of ingrained just innately into his profile. Makes a lot of sense because as an actual combatant, nothing kind of hints to Skarsnik being this mighty slayer of giant creatures or this person who can puncture armor easily. So it would make a lot of sense here that he does kind of have Gobbla factored into his profile out the gate, rather than kind of like a summon like Krell or something like that. Let's talk about the most prolific Skarsnik item here, Skarsnik's Proddor. So the way that this works is in tabletop is this pointy implement projects the spite of nearby night goblins. Basically, it's got a bound spell attached to it. It's a magic missile, just like we see in Total War Warhammer, and it shoots the target, and it does D3 strength 6 hits with no armor saves. So it does quite a bit of hits, and if you actually have night goblins around, you get D6 increase to those hits. So it does more damage around night goblins. So that's kind of an interesting little like caveat, right? Something that we don't really have in Total War Warhammer, because if we take a look at the actual profile, it is a magic missile. It does shoot shrapnel. It is got a really strong explosion, and it's really good at long range and against multiple combatants. You know, it's not really meant to kind of snipe down a lord that's flying, because it's hard to pinpoint that lord. It doesn't heat seek. If they're in proximity, sure, give it a go, but I'm not one to. I've actually used it just like that to try and snipe a lord that's flying, and I missed. And that's why I don't play Greenskins anymore, because I suck at them. But you do get Skarsnik's Proddor, which is very true to the spirit of the way it is in tabletop. I wish you kind of got a bonus around night goblins, but I don't know how you'd really do that, because not many other things have that effect, right? And there's no magic item in the game that I'm aware of that gets bonuses from being around other night goblins or I'm sorry, other units. It might give bonuses to those units, but it doesn't usually receive them right in retrograde. So that's kind of an interesting fact. But he does have a hatred towards dwarfs, a fear of elves, and he has Killing Blow on Gobbla. And Killing Blow we've seen in the actual Graveguard is interpreted by anti-infantry and AP. So I guess that's again how they're doing Killing Blow here is AP and anti-large. So that's, I guess, that kind of carryover. Now, he doesn't have anything that would hint towards him having any kind of negative leadership towards elves or anything like that, or any kind of boosts actually to hating dwarfs, which is a big thing. The hatred special rule allows you to re-roll hits. I think it's a hits of 1. I think that's what it was. But it is a pretty strong rule because it allows you to be a little bit more effective on your attack. So it is kind of sad that they kind of lose that dynamic outright. There's nothing that kind of says here that all goblins fear elves in the Total War lore, or I'm sorry, in Warhammer lore. So that doesn't really kind of carry over outside of, I guess, them having just completely shit leadership. He himself only has a leadership of 8, and a basic High Elf Spearman has a higher leadership than that, to give you an idea of how low his leadership actually is, and Greenskins as a whole. But he does have what is called Sneaky Schemes. And these are some of the special rules here. Now, Sneaky Schemes did not make it into the game in a namesake of Sneaky Schemes. And we'll talk a little bit more about this right here. Skarsnik is renowned for his evil sneakiness, sending warriors through dank secret tunnels to catch his enemy off guard before the battle has even begun. The way this works in tabletop is effectively, Skarsnik sends wild squigs to strike and hinder a unit from appearing on the tabletop, or on the board. So it enters at a different point in the battle than it normally would. So how they did this in Total War Warhammer is when you play the campaign, you have lightning strike right off the bat. So Skarsnik can actually isolate you if you have reinforcements, your army if it has reinforcements, by using lightning strikes right out the gate. So it is in there a little bit. He has his own campaign special rule too called the sneaky ones, or whatever the hell it's called. It's just like their unit, the little guys that stab. The nasty skulker is what it's called, I think it is, and it just means that he can vanguard deploy. So this kind of, I think, plays heavily into the Skarsnik sneaky scheme dynamic of him having that lightning strike. So he does kind of enact this very similarly in Total War Warhammer, because there's no obviously place-by-place deployment in this game. It's just, hey, we're placing our armies, let's go at it. So I enjoy that kind of embodiment of having you to have, or giving you that initiative on, say, an army that has reinforcements. You can get that ability to really kind of get around them and help kind of subdue that and get around it. But I really enjoy how they did sneaky schemes in this game. But let's talk about his last ability here, Trixie Traps. And the way this is done in Total War is pretty cool, right? So you get a little speed buff, you make these things stock. Let's read it here. Plus 24% speed, they get stock, and only spotted at very close range, of course. So you can cast this on any allies in the area. It affects every ally in the area, so it allows you to really kind of help control when that kind of attack is going to happen. In Tabletop, it's a bit different. You can actually, when something's fleeing, you can use sneaky straps. Ooh, that is sexual. Basically, they can reform as normal when they go to actually get charged as a charge reaction. They have more options available to them when they get charged or when they flee from combat. So Sneaky Traps allows you to kind of control your goblins, which otherwise would just kind of get mowed over. It allows you to kind of control their placement, their usage in the battlefield. And it's very similar to the way it is in Total War Warhammer, right? You get that same kind of essence, that way that we enable the ability to enable you to control how the engagement operates for your goblins. So overall, I think that Skarsnik kind of made it into the game with that true to Skarsnik feel. I don't feel like he is this totally different incarnation of what he is in Tabletop or anything of the sort. I don't really feel like there's many lords that are like that, period. Maybe there's some lords that have some attributes so completely far off from what their actual Tabletop rule is, but it still always stays true to some basic lore principle about that character. And that's something I've always appreciated with the way that Creative Assembly approaches bringing these lords into the game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this little video here on Skarsnik. You finally got this another foray into the Greenskins. If there's any other lords that are already in the game that you want to know more about, love to do another video for you guys here. Do be on the lookout for some stuff throughout the week here. Got some rumor stuff coming up. We've got some other action. I will hopefully be streaming almost every day this week. I got the internet fixed up and buttoned up, so we'll be doing that here. Be on the lookout. We'll be doing our Bretonia campaign. We'll be restarting it with the most recent patch, and we'll go into that action. But as always, guys, thanks for watching here today. Have a good one. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, all that action. But take care.